They just, tested another launch. The perception is that there's only so much the United States can do because we don't have all that much leverage over North Korea. There's only so much that most of our allies can do for the same reason. The one country that truly has leverage over North Korea is China. China has leverage over trade. China has leverage over energy. China is really the lifeline for North Korea, given their poor economic situation, their famine-like status. And so if there's any country that could really put the pressure on North Korea to turn back its nuclear program, it's China. And although there is a recognition that China has played a very constructive role in the six-party talks, I would say there's also a strong sentiment among many members that China could do more, will need to do more, or we're going to see North Korea's nuclear program continue apace. So those are two of the issues that I hear resonate quite a bit.
I would add one, which is China's role in lending money to the United States. China, I think, has a very legitimate concern about the $300 billion in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac GSE debt that it owns, and whether it will be fully repaid. And then China also has a concern about the volume of roughly $1 trillion in treasuries that it has also purchased, and the wisdom of continuing any lending to the United States. I recently became the first member of Congress actually to visit the Bureau of the Public Debt. It's on 9th Street here in D.C. I went to the trading floor. I watched the United States go $34 billion in debt in 15 minutes in an auction. On the principle that you always learn the most when you go to the forward edge of battle and talk to the most junior lieutenant. With the traders there on the floor, I said, tell me about changes that you've seen in the last year, now that the borrowing requirement of the United States has exploded. Last year we had to borrow roughly, to service old debt and add new, we had to borrow roughly $50 billion a week. Right now, with the spending Congress has approved, we have to borrow $157 billion per week, including we tried to borrow $90 billion today. And that is likely to accelerate with the other spending plans of the Congress. I learned there that there used to be 45 major entities that lent money to the federal government. That's dropped to 16. I learned that other sovereign borrowers, principally the United Kingdom and Germany, have now failed to sell their debt in key auctions. I learned that we now have a stopgap, that with China pulling out of the U.S. purchases, that we are replacing them potentially with purchases by the Fed. But it didn't reassure me now that one part of the federal government is going to be buying the other part of the federal government's debt. At $157 billion a week, you could blow through the federal balance sheet, the Fed's balance sheet, in about 3 months. And so we now have to be very careful and take signals from the Central Bank of China and Chinese purchases of debt very carefully. It would appear quietly and with deference and politeness that China has canceled America's credit card. I'm not sure too many people on Capitol Hill realize that that has now happened. There will come a time, given the massive borrowings that the Bureau of Public Debt have told us they've scheduled, where the lack of Chinese participation may have a significant impact. And we should track that because up until last month, they had been the number one provider of currency to the United States, and now no longer.
If I can just add one very quick exclamation point on that. I'm a member of the Blue Dog Coalition, and one of our sort of central principles is the need to balance our budget here at home. And it has been a frequent concern raised within our group, among others, the degree to which China has purchased our paper and we're in debt to China. And particularly, some months ago when there were comments out of Beijing that that may come to an end for reasons unrelated to the economic crisis, that only heightened fears that we were subject to a manipulation of our debt relationship by so much of our debt being owned by China. But I think given the current economic situation, the fear of what if China keeps buying our paper at such an alarming rate, has given way to the opposite fear, what if they stop? So I think Mark is exactly right. And for that reason, some of the concerns that have been expressed have really changed in the current economic climate.
I'm getting the signal. We've got 1 minute left, and Ambassador Ron Kirk has joined us. Let me ask you we've got a number of questions from the audience, and they're all good questions, but let me ask you the first one here very quickly, and ask you to make a quick response. This is not going to be easy to make a quick response to this. How do you perceive the Chinese approach to the U.S., and in what areas does the Chinese government need to improve, and how? Which side do you think has the more mature view of the other, and why? Can you answer that in 30 seconds?
I guess I'll take a crack at it since I've been at this now intensively for 4 years. China was horrible at its relations with the United States when the opening first happened. And since then, the quality of the embassy team has sort of enhanced a 1,000-fold, I would say. Officials at the Ministry of Defense, led by Yen Jiqi, who is probably the best America watcher, now at the helm of the Foreign Ministry, should give us great confidence that if the government is listening to his advice, they will make no errors with regard to, or no mistaken judgment with regard to American policy. And I have seen great maturity in Hu Jintao's team in being steady and conducting the relationship well. My one concern is disconnected parts of the Chinese military. Disconnected, it would appear, to conduct a very irresponsible satellite destruction test that then forced the United States Congress to come up with $50 million in a supplemental appropriation to move the space station away from all the debris that I think had irresponsibly been created, and irresponsible in triggering a naval confrontation with the United States right on the eve of President Obama's first significant interaction with the president. And so, in general, the president's office, foreign ministry, and the embassy, outstanding. Some disconnected parts of the military have embarrassed China, and I would hope would be more under the control of senior political leadership.
Well said. Congressman.
Well, I'm not sure that even in an hour I could grasp the question about who more misunderstands the other. I suspect that in cases of international misunderstanding, there's probably about an equal measure on both sides. We probably understand as little about the inner workings of the Chinese government and the thinking of the Chinese people as they understand of our own. But I will say that there are some things that, in terms of what I would suggest would improve the relationship, there are some things that China has done incredibly well. China had a major on the anniversary of the People's Liberation Army formation 50 years ago, had a naval parade. Now that could have been a show of power that would raise, fears of a burgeoning Chinese military and particular Navy and Chinese strong buildup in terms of their percentage of GDP on military expenditures. But they chose to make the theme of that be peaceful waters, peaceful ocean. They chose to invite the navies of other countries, including our own, to participate. That was, I think, a very smart strategic move. The cooperation that we're undergoing in dealing with this economic crisis, I think, is something will have very long-lasting positive repercussions. The two areas that I would emphasize more than any other that I think that overtures by China could have the biggest impact and biggest payoff in terms of what America is willing to do in return are North Korea and Iran. China, as I mentioned earlier, has tremendous leverage in North Korea. We need everyone pulling together in the same direction on Iran. And to the degree that China can be even more proactive on those issues, I think there's no limit to what the U.S. government would be willing to do in response. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for a very informative discussion here, and I must say that I am, as an American citizen, I am proud to have two very distinguished and brilliant young congressmen like this representing us, the United States Congress. Let's give them a big hand. Good. Good. Thank you very much.